Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics. And tomorrow, while the Tories are still attending to their own unending civil wars, Keir Starmer is going to begin setting out the 5 major platforms that Labour will fight the next general election on. But yesterday, he addressed the Farmers Union conference to set out his pitch for rural communities, including setting out his policies for a path back towards a much closer relationship with the EU. And rural communities are not a rich source of votes for Labour, but the times they are a-changing. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So when it comes to dealing with Brexit, farming is going to be, I think, our front line in many ways, just as fishing was for the Brexiteers. Difference here being that British farming will benefit from being the standard bearer for reversing Brexit. Fishing lost out big time with Brexit. Essentially, Brexit has created a real problem for the Tories in their farming heartlands. And I was discussing rural matters a little recently ahead of this farming conference when I commented on the latest polls for the Blue Wall, which mostly consist of formerly safe Tory rural seats, where Labour still maintain a lead over the Conservatives. Now, it's come down a little, but the point is Labour are usually firmly in third place in these seats. Not top, and certainly not top with some clear daylight between them and the normally dominant Conservatives. So there's opportunity here. You know, for Sunak to make serious efforts to win these areas back, he really needed to start by getting to that conference and making a robust appeal. Yes, of course, we know he's engaged in really important talks right now with the Northern Ireland Protocol, but does he want a realistic crack at next year's election or not? Instead, he sent a recorded message and a minister who drew ridicule by saying that Brexit had allowed the country to control its borders. There was laughter throughout the hall from the delegates, and that is because they know it's nonsense. You know, this sort of pitch might work on Daily Mail readers who aren't involved in anything to do with cross-border trade or anything else. Farmers know what's going on. But the laughter will have had an element of gallows humour in it as well. I've talked a few times about our complete lack of standards controls. Not just that they're poor, but that they are quite literally, no hyperbole, non-existent. This poses the serious risk of importing animal diseases which could wipe out livestock on a massive scale. Border control is an extremely sore point for farmers. For some of them, our post-Brexit border arrangements are an existential threat to their business. So having Farming Minister Mark Spencer representing the government, I think that was already insulting. Yes, he would have gone anyway. But he should have been like the junior member of the Tory delegation, not the one leading it. It's not just that Sunak himself didn't attend. They didn't even send the cabinet minister in charge of farming, Theresa Coffey. They sent along a junior minister. I wouldn't have been impressed if I was a delegate there. But if that wasn't bad enough, he then opened his mouth. That junior minister made a speech covering all the ways in which the Tories are screwing farmers over. Almost as if it was designed to put them in opposition next year. As far as I could tell, the government didn't have anything to say to the conference which would be of interest to them. You know, he was plugging the potential for an enhanced trade deal with Mexico, which actually represents a threat to British farming from cheaper, higher carbon footprint beef, for example. I honestly do not know what the Tories must be thinking. None of their post-Brexit trade deals have been of any benefit to farmers. The trade and cooperation agreement with the EU means that their trading potential is a little better than it would have been without it, but still represented a huge negative compared to what they had. But the other trade agreements have actually been damaging to British farming because they open up our markets to cheaper, low-quality produce. British farmers were already able to export their goods to these countries. The new trade deals do not open up those markets to them further. You know, the government actually had a plan of going to a farmers' conference and plugging all the Brexit policies which make British farming less competitive, less sustainable. Are they even trying to stay in power? Keir Starmer, on the other hand, not only attended in person, but he gave a speech that actually addressed rural issues. And more than just pointing out the problems, easy enough to just point out the problems caused by the Tories and by implication how it would be better under Labour. No, he presented policies designed to address them. You know, before I heard the speech, I thought to myself, you know, important for him to go along. It's the second time he's gone along as Labour leader. to speak to the delegates, answer their questions, because that's the benefit of going in person. You're not just presenting your speech and having them listen to what you've got to say, you listen to what they've got to say. And yes, present policies that would be of interest to them. But even with the Tories' current unpopularity, rural areas are not exactly low-hanging fruit of votes. I thought he would present policies that, yes, that would be of universal interest. So, yes, they would be interesting to rural communities, but, also attractive policies for everyone. Get it in the news and you're using your platform to speak to the wider public. But no, he was making a major push for the rural vote here. By all accounts, his speech went down quite well with a lot of people there. In an article later, I saw, for example, a quote from a senior delegate saying that what Starmer did was to address all of the key areas for tenant farmers, which would make a huge difference to food and environmental security. Starmer, I think, did three things that would have been really quite powerful. The first is he explicitly drew distinctions between issues for rural and urban communities, making it clear he understood how rural communities had challenges that maybe didn't exist to the same extent or at all in urban areas. He cited, for example, issues with ambulance. He talked about, there's some places where people are actually being told to take a taxi to the hospital because they can't get an ambulance to them. Well, this happens in a rural area, and that is a problem for you. He laid out domestic policies designed to address major concerns of people in rural communities. And although this was a conference for farmers, of course, it will have been reported on by rural news outlets as well for the wider public in these areas. And I think third, crucially, he talked about how he was going to re-establish the competitiveness of British farming. Now, there were a number of policies presented. First, he talked about the need to protect the high standards, not water them down. This would be a huge selling point for Labour because the Tories have already revealed their hand with their crap trade deals. It really is a very stark choice of stick with the Tories and see your business undercut by intensive farming from down under, or with Labour and make sure that nobody is able to sell into the British market goods which are of lower quality than British farmers are expected to produce. Second, he talked about bringing them closer to the EU. Now, Starmer has, of course, already announced that he will align our standards with the EU, that he wants veterinary agreements, something the EU have also expressed an interest in. There are some policy aims he presented which are not down for him to implement unilaterally. They need agreement with the EU. But the position is clear. He wants closer alignment with the EU. He wants a much enhanced trade and cooperation agreement in 2026. And third, and people who are wary of Labour's Brexit position, I think, should take note of this. He said that in trade, distance matters. That is an incredibly important line because what he's doing here is he's explaining why he's going to focus on those better trading relationships with the EU. He's not going to pursue the fantasy policies of the Tories of trying to compensate with trade elsewhere. There was none of that. We're going to try to open up these markets, and these markets, and these markets. We're going to do the same thing the Tories have tried to do, only we're going to do it better. No, it was, no. Do you know what? Distance matters with trade, which is what we've been trying to say for years. We need to get closer trading relationships with the EU. That is how we get our economy back on track. People look at Labour's Make Brexit Work slogan. They go, look, Starmer just doesn't understand Brexit. He does. Labour's Brexit policies are exactly the same as the Brexit policies of a party that will explicitly say they want to rejoin the EU. All that is missing from Labour's Brexit position is an intended endgame in some years in the future of full reversal. That's it. The actual policies are the same. David Lammy was saying, I listened to a recent podcast, the Alistair Campbell and Rory Stewart podcast. Labour don't have the power to do this right now, he's saying. What they're talking about is what they can achieve in their first term. Although their insistence on not rejoining the EU or even the single market or customs union sounds, and is intended to sound very long term, permanent even, all they can offer is a policy portfolio for one term. Yes, parties will sometimes want to present the journey that can take many years to accomplish, but when the public are not ready for that journey yet, and the EU are certainly not prepared to discuss it right now, why talk about it? You can't deliver it. Why present a destination that Labour cannot promise to deliver without lying, and which would risk their chances of winning power? Why would you do that? What they're promising to do is already going to be challenging enough and take most of that first term to accomplish. I say The direction Labour are promising to take us in leads to EU membership again. It is the exact same steps you need to take to join the EU. They are currently saying that we're going to stop partway down that path, but that's not relevant right now. While we are on that path and moving along it, that's where we're going. Now, if there were ever to be a sudden stop and that, no, this is fine, we're going to stay here, okay, sure, we can complain. But I don't think that's going to happen, because what you're then doing is limiting economic growth, and Labour cannot afford to do that. The Tories get away with it because the media cover for them. The media do not cover for Labour. But unless and until that happens, there is no difference between what Labour are doing and what any party in their position who felt able to talk about full reversal would be doing. And the rural areas would be one of the biggest benefactors of this pathway. See, Brexit isn't just tearing the Tories apart, it is disconnecting them from some of their traditional support as well. You know, rural communities are used to voting Tory, and for a lot of them, it will be a big wrench not to. But, you know, rural communities do present Labour and the rest of us with a path back to the EU, because this is a sector which won't just benefit from reversing the hard Brexit. It cannot actually survive the extreme Tory Brexit. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.